We want, through an effective partnership, to be able to implement the new urban agenda. And we've got, first of all, we need to share knowledge, because a balanced partnership means that everybody has fair access to knowledge. Secondly, we need to put in place systems that allow dialogue. And I really appreciate the question to you. How to create an enabling environment for partnership. How to mobilize now know-how. And I will add how to share. And then, how are we going to build a system that allow accountability and transparency in this partnership? What I would like to see happen after this session is a clear engagement towards building a balanced partnership. I call a balanced partnership a partnership where there's no one having his hand above another person's hand, but working equal. Some of you will say theoretical. How can we be equal in inequality? This is mindset. You might be old, like I am, but very young in the mindset. You might be in difference in wealth, but very balanced in the mindset. And this is what the Paris Declaration and the Accra Plan of Action did emphasize through partnership. And it is through true partnership that we will build a better world, a peaceful world. And you know, acquaintance to inequalities in cities, where you see gate communities for rich being cut off from ghettos of poor. This is destroying the communities. This is not the definition of communes, which is the living together. I hope that the new urban agenda will really address the SDG 11 to build sustainable cities and human settlement. And I hope that your exchange will pave a way to define the route towards Quito and to set the tone of what should be Habitat 3 in terms of building on partnership. Not fake partnership, true partnership, where everyone's voice is heard equal. Even if, and this will be to the minister, even if national government tend to say, now the true business is commencing. All the others go out because we are negotiating. We will be out there shouting because we want true partnership. And if we open the door, we will be enriched through a lot of ideas coming from people that you cannot imagine down there, having solutions that can be shared and improve the living condition of the people. Therefore, true partnership is the root. I support this approach, and there is a message that we should be receiving now from Gunther, which is a message from one of the co-presidents of the conference, Gunther. And I thank you.
Good afternoon. Clear my voice. Good afternoon. My name is Gunther Meinert. Can you hear me well? Yes? Okay. My name is Gunther Meinert. I work for GIZ as an advisor to the Federal Ministry of Economic and Development Corporation of Germany, which unfortunately cannot be here. Germany gives high importance to the Habitat 3 process, but for other commitments in Paris, etc., was not able to be present here. So I was asked by Franz Marais, who is the director of the Urban Policy Department in the ministry, to deliver a short message to you. So for the ministry, cities and municipal governments play a central role as drivers of sustainable development. Germany completely shares the view expressed by the Secretary General of the United Nations. The battle for sustainability will be won or lost in cities. Therefore, Germany supports the new urban agenda, which is to be adopted at the 3rd United Nations Conference in Quito. The outcome document sets out the international goals and guidelines for sustainable urban development. We do hope all UN member countries will increase their political engagement, I think the technical process is underway. What we need is a more political engagement in support of Habitat 3 in the next month. The new urban agenda will only be successful if it leads into joint and accelerated action both at the national and the local level. I think this is another aspect of the partnership Jean-Pierre just mentioned. For Germany, there are 3 tasks that are of key importance for implementing the new urban agenda. First, recognizing and empowering cities as development actors. I repeat, recognizing and empowering cities as development actors. I don't think that meets much resistance in this audience. It might not be adopted by others as easily. Second, create decent urban environments for all people to live in, livable cities for all. And third, integrated urban development, balancing trade-offs between development dimension, prioritizing allocation of resources. This is what you need local governments for. The new urban agenda cannot be separated from the 2030 agenda, particularly SDG 11. Habitat 3 will be the first global conference to take place after the adoption of the Agenda 2030. So the new urban agenda should be, could be, some say must be, the main contribution for the implementation of the Global Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. As part of Germany's contribution to the Habitat 3 process, the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, together with the Senate of Berlin, will conduct the German Habitat Forum in Berlin. It will take place in June 2016. The 2-day high-ranking conference of up to 700 representatives will offer the opportunity to shape key messages for the implementation of the new urban agenda. At the same time, The results of the conference, the Berlin recommendations, will serve as recommendations for the last negotiations concerning the final draft of the new urban agenda in the uprun to Quito. With that, I will close. That was a message from the ministry, and hand back to the chair. Okay. Whoever the chair is.
You can introduce yourself. Huh? Okay, so I'm acting as a chair of this session on behalf both of Jean-Pierre Longbassy and my director, who's going to leave in a few minutes, William Cobbett. So I think the next presenter would be Philip, who will introduce the big picture. Well, he will tell us. Philip, please. No. Okay, I feel very honored to make the start today. Thank you very much to the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and welcome to all the distinguished guests here in the room. Two warnings in advance. First of all, the material that I'm going to present to you is a little bit dry. Yeah? So I'm going to really try to make it as euphoric as possible and as engaging as possible. But this journey into the world of the SDGs, sort of, let's say, inner system, and the NUA, the New Urban Agenda, is just a little bit weird, yeah, you could say. But very important, that's why I want to present it to you. And the second warning is that this is work in progress. As the New Urban Agenda is evolving, it's hard to catch up sometimes. So we are trying in Berlin to visualize what's going on, to monitor, to contribute to the discussion. This is our work. This is not some kind of official government position, but it's an academic position, and therefore all the complaints should go to me afterwards. So what I will talk about. First of all, I want to just, maybe it's obvious to many people in the audience, but I want to state again why I think it's necessary to have a new urban agenda and how that could relate to the Sustainable Development Goals that have been decided upon in New York a few weeks ago. So what is the relationship between these SDGs, the Agenda 2030, and the new urban agenda? How can we make sense of it? What could be the added value? And after presenting you some alternative scenarios and being very biased, really pushing for one scenario, I then will elaborate and really go into the analysis, the systemic analysis of the Agenda 2030, the 17 goals, and try to sort of extract some lessons from it, how the system performs, how it's linked, what kind of interlinkages it has, what's missing, how the leverage of local urban stakeholders of cities is written into that, and where the gaps are and where I think the new urban agenda could add value. And then I will finish by some conclusions and recommendations, a sort of visualization of what I think the new urban agenda could look like and where this kind of thinking could feed into. First of all, why do we need a new urban agenda? Two very obvious scenarios. The first scenario, well, the new urban agenda is a great opportunity for cities to state their case. It's much less abstract, much closer to people. So why don't we forget about this whole complicated SDG stuff and have a proud but lonely sort of Habitat 3 process and a proud but isolated sort of independent new urban agenda. I think this kind of thinking, which there are certain risks that the way the process goes, it's quite complicated with many people discussing at the same time. Few people discuss actually the links to the SDGs. bears many, many risks. And I want to state those risks and hammer it in sort of as a personal opinion why I think this would be the completely wrong approach to go. First of all, the New Urban Agenda might not be relevant if we take it further as really just something that is authored by the urban community. It may not be relevant or considered even be recognized beyond our own community, because all the political attention of UN member states is captured and consumed by the Agenda 2030 process, by the COP process in Paris. Let's face it, there are other games in town, so it's not just us. We have to fight for being taken seriously. So goal 11, the goal that we all know, the urban goal, might also, and this is the second risk, be misunderstood as the only urban element of the SDGs, while the broader urban dimensions might be neglected. And I will show later in the presentation what I mean by this urban dimension of the SDG network. Further, the Agenda 2030 implementation might translate into a series of national government-driven sectoral programs that rain down on cities in sectoral ways, and we all know the shortcomings of that and the risks that bears, and the chances to actually find integrated solution in the urban space are becoming lesser. Finally, the role and leverage of urban stakeholders implementing the SDGs as a broad framework is limited. So the second drawing on the right presents an alternative scenario, which I think should be the one that we should discuss and adopt, which really understands the Agenda 2030 as a framework that already bears an urban dimension. I will show later why I think it's going beyond SDG Goal 11, which is something that is extremely important for cities to hang on to use, to capitalize on, and to think very carefully why the new urban agenda and how it could add value. And there are other agenda setting processes like the Paris outcomes that are being discussed that will have lessons for cities that should be taken into the discussion. Of course, also in Africa, specifically the Agenda 2063 might be for many people here much more important, much more in the forefront of their minds than even the Agenda 2030. So the potentials I see in that approach is to complement the urban dimensions of the SDG, which is there, but with problems. I will talk about it later. Towards integrated urban development, improving the ownership of SDGs through the involvement of local urban stakeholders such as city administrations, urban networks, non-state actors, including NGOs, businesses, academia, etc., which is hasn't really been achieved. The SDGs so far have remained quite abstract, quite far away, and therefore by creating ownership, involvement of local urban stakeholders to also bolster their role and responsibility within the framework overall. So the first scenario that, if I take this kind of thinking of how to link the new urban agenda to the SDGs as really the basis for my talk, there are two ways of maybe going. One is to understand then the NUA as a guide for local SDG implementation. This just shows a kind of a way in which somehow the new urban agenda could pick up these kind of criticisms that have been stated vis-à-vis the SDGs, the lack of the implementation dimension, this kind of very universalist, complex language of the Agenda 2030 that is so difficult for us to find links to find relevance to our local urban situations. So to think about roles, resources, capacities, finance, work plan, all these things that the SDGs don't deliver from an urban perspective, to provide this link, which is more than a linguistic link, it's also a mental link between a universalist agenda and local urban action, and to provide a sort of urban synthesizer, stringing together the loose ends such as urban relevant sector-specific targets, indicators, and so forth, to strengthen integrated approaches, and to provide effective policy recommendations and management tools for the local level. So this is, if you follow that, then really the process now in the policy units, in the various workshops, conferences like this should really be about actually, amongst other things, identifying, well, where's the urban dimension in terms of where are the targets, where are the urban relevant indicators within the SDGs that we could link to and think about their implementation. in cities, and so to develop a strategy for linear operationalization of SDG targets. The second scenario is a little bit, it's putting a slightly different emphasis by saying that the New Urban Agenda should be really a tool that works not just as an implementation tool of SDGs, but also as a tool that could actually critically reflect where we got to with the SDGs in terms of, from an urban perspective, and think about how to systemically improve that, how to add, how to find gaps, omissions, and so forth. So if you take that drawing as a representation of the 17 goals, with, of course, the goal 11 being the key urban goal, I will show you later how many other targets of other goals have actually very distinct sort of urban references and dimensions that we should pick up, with gaps in linkages, with gaps in content, which we could improve. So the urban agenda is something that sort of, let's say, sits, integrates with the SDG framework. I think I stated that. So now I want to take you into the world of the SDGs itself. So I'm going to present it not in form of the nice little sort of iconic diagrams and that UN Habitat is doing it right now, but as a very dry circle, right? So a dry circle that has all the 17 goals around it. Here, goal 11 is marked in blue. The next layer, I represent the targets. There are 169 targets so far within the SDGs, and with 10 for goal 11 alone. And then there is the indicator level, which this number refers to an earlier 0 draft. So right now the indicators are being rewritten and finalized, so the number will surely change. But there you go. This is the diagram in which I want you to understand the SDG framework. Now, how do we, why am I talking then about linkages? I'm not the only one who's talking about that. So in fact, I'm just bringing together quite brilliant research by David Leblanc and also by the International Council for Science, ICSU, that earlier in the year have analyzed the SDG framework in terms of linkages. How do the goals, targets, indicators actually link up with each other to prevent being sort of a sector-driven, fragmented agenda, but being a cohesive, sort of integral, systemic agenda? David Leblanc has defined very explicit links, whereas the International Council for Science have focused really much more on implicit sort of content links. And I have to say that the SDGs, if you have read it, if you have read the text, you know that it's quite vague in terms of language. Yeah, so it's interpretation here. It's not that there is an explicit statement of links within the writing of the SDGs right now. But I give you an example what I mean by explicit links. For instance, at the target level, how targets are linked with each other. Goal 3, target 3.6. By 2020, half the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents. That's stated there as a target. And the second target of goal 11, by 2030, provide access to safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport systems for all, improving road safety. Yeah, so it's pretty clear. I mean, they're practically talking about, there's a strong overlap of what they're talking about. So, this issue of road safety is approached or is embedded in 2 different goals, so there is a kind of linkage there. I will spare the other examples and just show you a little bit how we then proceeded to map and identify these links that are mentioned by Leblanc and by the ICSU. It gets very complicated, and I just don't have the time. I'd love to take you through it maybe afterwards. But this is mapping the goal 11 targets to other goals. This is mapping links from other indicators to goal 11 and goal 11 targets. So you see a kind of increasingly sort of complex web that you might say, oh God, why do we need to discuss that now? But I do think it's extremely important to understand if we are really serious about SDG implementation and so forth. And this is the kind of preliminary outcome of this particular analysis that we produced. Here you see again the wheel with the goals on the outside, then on the second inner ring the targets and then the indicators. And we found out in our analysis that 10 out of 17 SDG goals are linked to goal 11, very explicitly linked to the urban goal. Some explicitly, some implicitly. Researchers can't agree. That's why the 5 plus 9 is not 10. So 30% of the targets are linked with goal 11, 12 explicitly, 18 implicitly, and 39% of indicators are linked with goal 11. So this kind of thinking of linkages shows to us that really there is an urban dimension of the SDGs, which is much broader than SDG goal 11. But this urban dimension is mostly present at the level of targets and indicators, less on goals. It's very abstract. There are also missing linkages, like, for instance, no linkage between goal 11 and the targets of goal 10, inequality, which is something really crucial. Or goal 16, peace and inclusive society, is not linked up. Indicator links are also missing, and also target links are missing, although they're changing now. So these kind of general gaps of interlinkages reflect the need to further develop the SDGs towards operationalization and implementation, which is why we think at that moment the new urban agenda could make a difference. The second analysis, and then I'm coming to the conclusion. The second analysis is about the leverage of local urban stakeholders in SDG target implementation. So the leverage meaning, well, how are local urban stakeholders, city governments, and other urban stakeholders actually thought of when the targets of the SDGs were formulated? Again, we have to say that there is no clear assignment of roles and responsibilities for any actor of any level. The SDG language just doesn't cover that. The notion of local actually is only mentioned, I'm talking about the zero draft here, 5 times in combination with communities or planning or management processes, just 5 times in the entire document. And the notion city is also only mentioned 5 times. And in order to still interpret, well, how at least latently are local urban stakeholders thought of within the SDG framework, we defined 3 categories. One category where we identified targets where we feel very, very explicitly that they can only be implemented really by local urban stakeholders. A second category, which is called a should-be category. There's no real, the language doesn't really provide clear, unambiguous links, but it's pretty impossible to think about it without a participation, at least, of local urban stakeholders. And the third category, where we feel that the SDG text has pretty much failed. It should have mentioned more clearly local urban stakeholders, but it didn't do so. So here we go with that outcome. We felt that 21% of all the targets, I'm looking at the targets now, the second ring, 21% fall into the can only be category, 24% fall into the should be category, and another 20% fall into the should be revised and reworded, ideally, category. So this means if you add this together, you could make an argument by saying that, well, up to 65% of the targets of the SDGs require significant involvement of local urban stakeholders in order to be achieved, or the other way around, if they're not part of this implementation process, the achievement of those targets might be at risk. And I think this is should be a strong message for us, and could be a strong argument for us to argue that the urban community is a significant player in the SDG implementation. So the potential added value of if you follow that thinking, the potential added value of the New Urban Agenda lies here. The SDG does not address the how this can be achieved. None of the inputs, capacities, means of financing, political frameworks, challenges, or the who, roles, responsibility, accountability, and so forth. The way in which the SDGs are worded only point to a 45% indirect participation of local urban stakeholders, a further 25%, they're not really clearly evident that they have been part of the thinking. And again, up to 65% are at risk, according to our presentation, our research. Now I come to a conclusion and recommendations. I'm fully convinced that only if the New Urban Agenda complements, not doubles, the SDGs, can political attention and resource allocation during the new urban agenda implementation be secured? Again, up to 65% of the targets are at risk. We should maybe, those figures make a difference if we keep on arguing for that, for the urban community to be taken more seriously. The complementarity could better leverage the mandate capacity power of local urban stakeholders as key agents to implement the entire SDG framework, not just Goal 11, and could foster integrated approaches to implementation rather than having to accept all these SDGs translating into government-driven sectoral programs. So the added value could therefore, by advocating for the importance of the urban narrative for the SDG implementation, by promoting the agency of local urban stakeholders, by improving the systemic functionality of the SDGs, and by also adding, feeding into the indicator writing process, which is the bit of the SDG framework that's still being negotiated. Now, there's a dilemma, of course. When you argue, well, local urban stakeholders should be everywhere, this might be overly ambitious and overly complex. In the end, we need to have a concise, clear new urban agenda. But at the same time, I would strongly advocate not just to reduce our contribution to Goal 11. So we need to find some kind of compromise. And we are just working and discussing with GIZ and others, how to get out of this sort of dilemma, and came up with the idea of maybe to identify 20 key targets beyond the Goal 11 targets. We call them sort of right now in this slightly catchy language super targets, as key leverage points for local urban stakeholders to link into the entire SDG framework. And we identified, I'm just showing you a first sort of attempt to visualize that, what these could be. We identified them at the moment through our sort of, let's say, systemic analysis, through linkages and leverages. Identifying these kind of targets, and this is a kind of quick representation where I feel that sort of conceptually somehow the new urban agenda should be placed like a sort of spider within the web of the SDGs that focuses, yes, a lot on Goal 11, but should really feed into and link and take those other targets very, very seriously. I know that other agencies and scholars are thinking also now about the target level. This would be the next step. Unfortunately, we didn't have access to this evolving discussion around targets, but I think even on indicators, but even on a target level, which is represented here, I think this could be very important. The important gaps that you can spot immediately, the first one here on the left is climate. Yeah? The SDGs have been so far very underdeveloped sort of in their articulation on climate change issues, of course, because we now have the Paris conference, and the Paris COP agenda will provide clues and links which we would then have to adopt and take into our thinking. There are other gaps too. Now, what that could mean, I'm coming almost to the end, for the new urban agenda architecture. Again, another difficult diagram which I'm asking you to understand. Here I placed these sort of super targets, if they're 20 or 30, we don't know. And of course, they have to be supported by urban relevant indicators as a sort of urban essence of this global agenda setting processes involving the SDG framework, the Paris outcome, also the African Agenda 2063, particularly relevant for Africa. So to identify, to filter out those key targets and indicators from these global agenda setting processes to make sure that we achieve complementarity. And this is essentially borrowing from a global process, global discussion process. And then this could be surrounded by other components and elements that I think the new urban agenda needs to address, which is primarily the top, the roof, the urban narrative. We know that the urban narrative might be quite clear to us as an urban community, but it is very unclear, fuzzy, vague to many others who make decisions around budget distributions, resource allocation, and so forth. So the new urban agenda has to be a tool to advocate the urban narrative. The actual new urban agenda sort of essence I marked here with this big dark blue box a sort of enabling framework, a delivery framework, policy guidelines, standards, such as the mandates of actors, capacities, fiscal flows, etc., 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 which still addresses mainly, I think, the national urban policy level, and it has to be supported by an evolving set of enabling tools for local implementation, addressing specific local and regional contexts. So in the diagram, I try to differentiate between this very global scale, a national scale, and a local sort of application scale that the agenda somehow has to address, but with different tools and different kind of language and thinking. And framed, I think, of course, it's been mentioned already, the monitoring and evaluation system that has to work across these scales, and a continuous expert advisory with important partners and NGOs, such as those present in the room. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so, no, that's fine. For sure, yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to mention this. These brochures bring together a series of position papers and contributions. They're issued by the City Alliance, if you're interested in reading more about that, there's also a report on this kind of thinking in here.
Okay, thank you very much, Philip, for this very comprehensive introduction and potential linkages between the new urban agenda and the SDGs. I think we have a good overview of what is expecting us. I was particularly interested in the three levels. I mean, because it global, national, local, and also local. So I think there are many challenges. No, we have a good framework now, which is being put in place, but we have many challenges ahead. Among them, I mean, challenges to the global community, challenges to the national government to provide also the enabling environment for this to happen, challenges at the local level. I mean, cities can no longer be doing business as usual, and they will need to address these issues properly with visions, with the tools, etc., and challenges of the capacities also at the city level to be able to implement these agenda. Okay, so we have many things ahead. I would like to call Mr. I hope I will spell your name well, William Mudele Walaga, is that right? Okay, from the African Union, if you can join us and give us your view on maybe the relevance, the importance of decentralization, local governance within these agenda, and how, I mean, these agenda which were presented, SDGs, New Urban Agenda, also fit within the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry there, but I'm loud enough. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've already got two kind of shortcomings that I will not be able to make a visual presentation because I'm not a professor. So I don't have those kind of skills to do those kind of visual presentation on the screen to show, but I'll make an attempt from where I stand. William and others, I work for the African Union these days. So I'm here in that aspect. And I want to start by kind of outlining the importance of decentralization and local governments in the African Union context. You recall that the African ministers of local governments used to organize themselves under a ministerial body, which has been abolished since 2014 and turned into an organ of the African Union called the LOG. That organ of the African Union, which is a subcommittee under the Specialized Technical Committee number 8, where I also happened to accidentally fall. So it's in that perspective that I want to share with you how the African Union sees the role of local governments and decentralization, one, in the implementation of Vision 2063, and going forward in the SDGs and the new urban agenda. Now, of course, local governments is as currently the in thing in terms of implementing development programs in our respective communities and countries. But notwithstanding that, there's still a number of challenges that hinder actual effective and efficient delivery of these services to the people. So probably one of the issues we are here is like, how do we overcome those challenges to ensure a more effective delivery of services, including the participation of the same. So to this effect, the African Union has gone ahead recognizing this role. The African Union has got ahead and drawn up this small booklet. I don't know whether people have come across it. If you haven't come across it, we have a stand downstairs in the exhibition hall. You can go and look up one. It's called the African Charter on the values and principles of decentralization, local governance, and local development. And this is geared at defining the role at all levels on how they play in terms of not only implementing those African Union-driven programs, but probably onto a larger scale. And this plays a larger role into the African Vision 2063. If you've had the opportunity to look at the African Vision 2063, you'll realize that various levels of both implementation, governance, and decision-making have been recognized in there, to the extent that decentralization and local government appears as almost a section with its own targets to be achieved during this time. And one of the important things which probably I wanted to mention to you here for purpose is the fiscal autonomy, the financial autonomy. It is, the target is set for 2030 for all local governments to be financially autonomous, because it's one of the important empowering aspects of local governments to be able to not only take decisions, but also to implement the decisions they take in that respect. Now, so you'll find that the African Vision 2063, at all, it's got the lower local levels, including local governments in this respect, almost cutting across the entire document for the various components. And they have got a specific one that specifically addresses that. Now, going forward onto the new urban agenda, which is still in a process, and we hope we'll have an outcome by the end of next calendar year, is that the African Union has been able to to galvanize the African member states during this period to come up with a common position. For those who had opportunity this morning, this common position was being discussed by one of the meetings that took place in the morning from 9 to midday as part of the process of increasing consultation and input in that process. But one of those common positions, recommendations we are making to the new urban agenda that is being developed is one of the pillar, and I kind of forget the number, but it's one of those 8 pillars, and it is called people-centered. People-centered, emphasizing the need, emphasizing the must that if we are to succeed, we must move from the national to the lower levels. And it only doesn't mean like we should have local governments that are simply an appendage of the center, but they must be people-centered because they are near the people where action and results are expected to come from. Now, so we've got this this position, the first one for the Africans to have a say in how the Habitat 3 outcome will be shaped, to take care of the unique character of the African process in the urbanizing era, and to ensure that it is captured. So we are also hoping that the outcome document of Habitat 3 that will come out at the end of this year will not only contain the common position of Africa, but it will also have the global outlook on the urban development for the next 20 years. So it will be so broad that the Africans will have to synthesize, find out what is relevant to them. So we are already looking at the post-2016 to develop under the African Union what we think should be relevant to the Africans in the context of the 2063 vision we have developed. And we hope that out of that, member countries will be able to cascade downwards and develop appropriate action plans and programs that are relevant to the implementation and achievement of the aspirations of the Habitat 3 in their respective countries. As a follow-up to this, we are developing a monitoring mechanism that will ensure a feedback both from the national governments and the various structures of local governments. Incidentally, at the African Union, a High Council of Local Governments is being established. Kind of like looking at like local governments are getting too many forums. Probably they may need to find a way of consolidating them rather than tumbling over each other. And we tend to take advantage of these structures to provide us with a feedback on the processes of implementing the new urban agenda as it unfolds. I don't know how much I've covered what you wanted, but probably if you find I haven't done so well, you ask me more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If you please can sit down here. Yeah, it will be better. And
If they don't screen anymore.
No, I don't think so. So I would like to ask the Deputy Minister of Local Governments of Ghana, Mr. Emmanuel Agyekum, sorry, I mean, I'm bad at names, to give us his views on what is the role of national government in the implementation of the SDGs first and the upcoming new urban agenda, and what should be the measures that need to be taken at a national level, in your opinion, to advance these agendas?
Thank you very much. First of all, I will want to say thank you very much for the opportunity given me. I will try and bring it all together. The government of Ghana, since 1998, created a multi-level approach or the multi-level framework for the citizens' participation in decision-making in local government through the decentralization process. This was enshrined in the 1992 Constitution. The Constitution, that is the Article 240, Section 2, requires that the local government system has functions, powers, responsibilities, and resources transferred to local authorities in coordinated manner. It is also stated, or it also states, measures to be taken to enhance the capacity of local government to plan, initiate, coordinate, manage, and execute policies. These are key elements for the inclusive local government and decision-making in Ghana. Ghana enacted various local government acts to anchor decentralization and the multi-level framework of planning and plan implementation. Prominent among these local government laws is the local government law, that is Act 462, which established the multi-level metropolitan, municipal, and district as a political, administrative, planning, and rating authority. The National Development Planning Commission Act, that is 479, established the National Development Planning Commission responsible for preparation of the National Development Framework and guideline for the plan preparation and for monitoring and evaluation. The Planning System Act 480 defined the role of each level in planning and plan implementation. There is also the Ghana enactment that transfers departments, human and financial resources to the MMDAs. If I say MMDAs, I'm talking about the Metropolitan, Municipal, and District Assemblies. The various levels created in Ghana for planning and participatory decision-making areas. The central government includes the ministries and the departments for the policy formulation, monitoring, and evaluation. The 10 regional coordinating councils, we actually have 10 regional coordinating councils at the regional levels, are responsible for coordinating and harmonizing, monitoring the 216 metropolitan, municipal, and district authorities across the countries. Sub-institutional structures of the metropolitan, municipal, and district authorities. And finally, to ensure community participation is the planning and plan implementation we have. The unit committee at the community level complement the framework and multi-level down to the community level. Planning and decision-making is a bottom-up. However, these are based on global and national development framework, which is used by the MMDAs as a guide to prepare the plan for implementation. Ghana has various policies, frameworks to guide the MMDAs in planning and implementing this, includes the National Decentralization Policy and the Urban Policy. The national government should have, or governments in Africa should have the political will to devolve powers to the local level. This should not be devolution of only powers, but the power should be accompanied by also the transfer of resources, both financial and human resource, and means to local authorities. The national government formulate policies in Ghana. We formulate policies, monitoring and evaluation, and leave plans and implementation to the local authorities through bottom-up decision-making. In the case of Ghana, this is enshrined in the Constitution and strong legal framework to create metropolitan, municipal, and district authorities with transfer of human and financial resources to give them the autonomy. The MMDAs have the authority for planning and implementation of projects and programs for the development. As indicated in my opening remarks, Ghana by law has multi-level framework for decentralization, plan and implementation, monitoring and evaluation using the MMDAs. The SDG and the New Urban Agenda will be adapted through National Development Framework, and the MMDAs will localize it through the preparation of development plans in line with the National Development Framework, which are prepared using the SDG, especially the Goal 11 and the National Urban Agenda. The local level should have strong financial capacity, human resource capacity, and be able to, or the political capacity for the political will to drive development strongly at the local to improve the standards of living of the people. On this note, I just want to say thank you very much. I don't know if I've done justice to your question. Thank you.
Of course you did. Thank you, Minister. The first speaker would be, again, no? I'm not sure I will pronounce your name very well. Madame Jean? You say Jean or Jean? Jean de la Harpe, from Salga. So the South African Local Government Association. And I would like to ask you 3 questions. And at the end, you will tell me, okay, did I respond well to your 3 questions? And I will say, yes, of course. Anticipating. The 3 questions would be, do you think that local governments are sufficiently equipped with capacities, resources, etc., to properly implement these agendas? First question. The second question would be, but I think you had them already, no? Okay. The second question would be, what would you expect? What would you expect from national governments for you to act in this respect? And the third one, as you come from an association of municipalities, what is the role of these association of municipalities in negotiating, I would say, with national governments at national level to get the resources and the means to implement these agendas? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and it's a great honor and pleasure to be speaking here today. I might not stick strictly to the questions as you've asked them in the order. I think the last question on associations is very key. I think we have a very strong role to play. I come from the South African Local Government Association, and it's amazing the influence we have over policies and procedures being an association of 276 municipalities. One can go into Parliament and advocate. One can talk to national departments, sector departments, and push for policy changes. So it's a great space to be in, and yes, I think we do have a strong role to play there. Coming to the question of whether municipalities have the capacity, I think those diagrams that that Philip showed present the problem. That huge big circle, so many goals, so many targets, so many indicators. And when you're a municipality and you're struggling with basic services, I'm not sure you even want to look at that. And that's part of the paradigm where we come from. So both the SDGs, all the SDGs are going to require a paradigm shift from the business as usual approach. They require the basics to be done differently: water, sanitation, waste. And in the real world, even the most capacitated municipalities are facing challenges in terms of turning conceptual strategies, policies, and so on, like your complicated diagram, into practical action. So, for example, if you're addressing the causes of degradation of a river, That is much more complex than simply a capital project to upgrade the river. Capital projects are tangible. Collective processes requiring complex regulations, behavior, and social change is something that's completely different. And I think that's where municipalities will really struggle with the SDGs. Problems facing municipalities today are increasingly requiring collaboration across energy, water, waste. But as we know, at the municipal level, the bureaucracy works in silos: water, electricity, waste, without joint planning, without collaboration. So this is where we really need a new paradigm with a lot more integration, tackling problems together and finding joint and tangible solutions. However, there are real barriers to achieving this paradigm, including capacity gaps, technology gaps, resistance to new technologies, and also resistance to a new way of doing things. As bureaucracies, municipalities certainly do not operate as innovative think tanks, able to take on these new ideas and new ways of looking at things. So it's not easy in a municipality to bring about change, to even get people to work together. At the national level, there are many sectors that are looking at, that are actually undertaking very constructive work around green technologies, renewable energy, energy efficiency. But at the municipal level, there tends to be a lack of capacity to make those linkages between the goals, the targets, and indicators, and also to transform the way the municipalities work to address challenges, develop plans, allocate resources, and ultimately ensure sustainability. So I think the challenge is exactly as what was said in that first brilliant presentation, is how do you turn the abstract of that wheel into an actionable agenda at the municipal level? Which of those goals, targets, indicators are viable for municipalities? I think national regulations, frameworks, strategies certainly can assist us in setting the tone and getting change. If national government, for example, creates a framework for energy efficient buildings, that will obviously help to bring about change. But at the municipal level, these frameworks still need to be translated in into day-to-day action. And we need support to do this. We need to know, how do you do it practically? Who should be responsible? How should our different departments be structured to actually make these things happen? Support in the form of winning municipalities over to a new way of working and a different way of working is going to require major advocacy. I think we're going to have almost a campaign to take that wheel and turn it into something tangible and real. Inductions, talking about the benefits of sustainability, talking about successful municipalities and cities who've done it and made a success, including technical support and the enabling tools. The reality of the situation, I think, in many of our countries in Africa is we are still dealing with the basics. Access to basic services, water, sanitation, electricity. Here in South Africa, our president, together with the Minister of essentially local government, launched a Back to Basics campaign. The challenge for us is, how do we get the basics addressed in a sustainable way? Because we are still stuck with old technologies and old ways of delivering services. We find in many municipalities, people will say it's a luxury to worry about carbon when we're still trying to address basic services and poverty. But without new technologies and methodologies, our basics will continue to be unsustainable. So often with what I think is one of the most well-funded capital programs in Africa, in South Africa, we have municipal infrastructure grant. We have all kinds of grants to ensure basic services for the poor. And despite all the funds and despite all the support, we're still struggling to ensure that that infrastructure results in sustainable services. So I think the challenge is, how do we get this paradigm shift, this shift that's in the wheel? How do we get that and make it tangible for the local level? And my hope is that the new urban agenda will really take that very practically, narrow some of the issues down so that people can really grab, even if it's 2 or 3 of those that are linked, and start to develop a new way of working and addressing these things. So I look forward to the rest of the engagement, and thank you for those sharing their ideas.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jean. I will introduce our last speaker in French, because it's French speaking. Donc notre dernier orateur. You have earphones? It's okay? No, that's not true. I mean, we have 2 languages here. Notre dernier orateur, simple, sera Monsieur de Cazotte, donc du ministère français des Affaires étrangères, qui a un rôle particulier dans la préparation de Habitat 3, avec donc en représentation de la communauté des partenaires au développement. Pas facile. 2 questions. Le rôle des partenaires au développement dans l'appui à la mise en œuvre de ces agendas, d'une part. Et l'importance des mécanismes de suivi, d'évaluation pour faire en sorte que cet agenda soit effectivement, la mise en œuvre de cet agenda soit effectivement concrétisée. 2 questions to our speaker. I'm going to make the translation as well. 2 questions to our speaker. Is it okay with the translation, or shall I translate myself? It's translating. Was it okay, Claire? Donc 2 questions. I'm going to repeat the questions. 2 questions à notre orateur. La première sur le rôle des bailleurs de fonds en appui à la mise en œuvre de ces agendas, enfin de cet agenda SDGs, ODD, et puis de l'agenda à venir New Urban Agenda, le nouvel agenda urbain, et en particulier en ce qui concerne l'Afrique, puisque nous sommes en Afrique. Et puis la deuxième question sur les mécanismes de suivi et de monitoring, d'évaluation qu'il convient de mettre en place pour s'assurer de la mise en œuvre effective de ces agendas. Henri.
Merci Serge. Effectivement, je vais parler en français parce que c'est une belle langue et qu'il y a des francophones dans la salle. Et que pourquoi se limiter à une seule langue internationale? En fait, je voudrais démarrer par une réponse à Philippe. Je pense que c'est peut-être pas très habile, et une réponse positive, très habile de proposer à la communauté internationale de dire qu'il faut viser l'araignée. Donc je suis le dernier schéma que nous avons vu, c'est une araignée, a spider, hein? Et cette vision de nouvel agenda urbain comme une araignée n'est peut-être pas la meilleure façon de vendre ce nouvel agenda urbain. Donc je suggère que l'on cherche à représenter cette relation entre les objectifs de développement durable et le nouvel agenda urbain avec un autre animal, ou quelque chose qui soit plus, qui nous propose une image plus consensuelle, je dirais, qui ne nous fasse pas peur. La deuxième question que je voudrais dire à propos de la présentation de Philippe, c'est qu'il a oublié dans sa présentation de faire référence à l'agenda d'action d'Addis Abeba. Or, l'agenda d'Addis Abeba, qui est le sorti de la conférence sur le financement du développement en juillet de cette année, contient un paragraphe extrêmement important qui, pour Africités, pour les collectivités locales d'une manière générale, c'est le paragraphe 34 qui célèbre les autorités locales comme partenaires et les premiers responsables de la mise en œuvre du nouvel agenda de développement durable 2030. Donc là, on a un formidable outil pour rapprocher notre nouvel agenda urbain des objectifs et des moyens de mise en œuvre de ces objectifs. Je crois que c'est un argument extrêmement positif et il faut le présenter positivement. Et je pense que dans votre exposé, vous proposez trop de choses peut-être négatives. Je pense que là, il y a un potentiel extrêmement intéressant. Alors, je suis par contre tout à fait d'accord sur la proposition que vous faites de dire que si les collectivités locales ne sont pas impliquées fondamentalement dans ce nouvel agenda développement durable 2030, on n'y arrivera pas. Et c'est le discours qui a été tenu aux Nations Unies par l'ensemble des États membres. C'est un agenda universel, donc l'ensemble des pays, mais c'est un agenda pour tous les acteurs financiers, la société civile, le secteur privé et les collectivités locales. Donc nous sommes dans un agenda de développement durable 2030. Sans les collectivités locales, on n'y arrivera pas. Et c'est ce qu'a dit hier le maire de Dakar. Il a dit pas de développement local, pas de développement durable, sans développement local. Donc je pense que là, nous avons quelque chose qui est politique, qui est très fort, très puissant, et nous sommes dans une négociation du New Urban Agenda, du nouvel agenda urbain, qui sera une négociation politique. Ce ne sera pas une négociation technique. Il faut donc que nous nous mettions dans une attitude politique pour comprendre l'engagement que les États vont avoir d'utiliser tout ce qui a pu être fait au cours de cette année, et donc ce nouvel agenda urbain doit être le résultat, d'une certaine façon, de cet agenda 2030 du développement durable. Nous devons absolument associer ces deux dynamiques et, d'une certaine façon, à la fois recevoir, donc, avec un passage du global vers le local et en même temps recueillir les initiatives, les dynamiques du développement urbain pour l'intégrer dans l'agenda global du développement durable. Alors, pour répondre à la question sur le rôle des donateurs, des institutions financières internationales et des partenaires du développement, je pense que ce nouvel agenda de développement durable, il est révolutionnaire. Il va changer complètement. On a réécrit l'agenda du développement. C'est une nouvelle écriture et c'est aussi une nouvelle façon de travailler. Et je pense que l'ensemble des institutions internationales de développement vont se transformer pour mettre en œuvre l'agenda de développement durable. Et il va y avoir donc une adaptation des institutions. Je peux parler de ma propre organisation française, l'Agence française de développement. Ces objectifs stratégiques seront les objectifs de développement durable. Et donc, tout le système international va s'organiser autour des 17 objectifs de développement durable. Ce sera très difficile de sortir, d'être en dehors de ce schéma global, et il faut donc faire tout en sorte pour qu'on ait ce rapprochement urbain du grand agenda. Donc il va y avoir une attention particulière des institutions de financement dans ce cadre global. Je pense aussi que dans la proposition qui est faite et qu'on doit réfléchir pour l'agenda urbain, il y a des avancées très importantes cette année. Les avancées, ce sont le rôle des acteurs, le rôle du secteur privé notamment. Il est dit que le secteur privé devra être un partenaire de l'atteinte des objectifs. Je pense que ceci est un sujet que dont on doit tenir compte pour notre discussion. Et ce n'est pas donc seulement le rôle des institutions internationales, c'est aussi le rôle des autres acteurs, puisqu'il faut, comme l'a dit M. Elangbassi, il faut construire ces partenariats entre les différents acteurs, les collectivités, les États, les gouvernements, le secteur privé et bien sûr la société civile. Donc nous avons à construire ces plateformes de partenariat. Donc c'est ceci qui, au niveau national, va être un des grands objectifs que nous devrons mener au cours de l'année et des années qui viennent, c'est de construire les plateformes pour la mise en œuvre des objectifs de développement durable et de l'agenda urbain dans les pays. Donc dans les pays doivent organiser des forums, des dialogues, des mises en relation entre l'État et les différents acteurs pour co-construire, pour définir les objectifs nationaux et les cibles nationales de mise en œuvre de l'agenda global. Donc on doit internaliser l'agenda global dans chaque pays en fonction des politiques nationales de développement, en fonction des différenciations des pays, puisque entre l'Afrique du Sud et un pays du Sahel, ça n'a rien. On est dans un continent, on est dans des pays extrêmement différents. Entre un pays qui a une culture, une histoire et un droit juridique du monde anglo-saxon et un autre qui est dans le droit romano-germanique, on est dans un autre monde. Les sujets sont il y a des priorités différentes. Il faut donc adapter l'agenda global à l'agenda local. Et pour cela, il nous est proposé de créer ces partenariats nationaux, ces outils de dialogue, ces plateformes de collaboration où l'ensemble pourra permettre de mobiliser l'ensemble des acteurs. Donc je crois que ça, c'est ce que nous allons devoir mener tous ensemble au cours des mois et des années qui viennent. Je pense que aussi Habitat 3 doit réfléchir à un certain nombre de propositions en termes d'engagement. Et j'ai bien aimé ce que nous a dit Günther sur cette idée d'avoir des effets de levier, des effets qui nous permettront d'accélérer l'atteinte des objectifs dans l'agenda urbain. Et il me semble que c'est peut-être un niveau d'engagement sur lequel nous pourrions réfléchir, qui permettent d'aller plus loin que les seules cibles et objectifs qui sont dans l'agenda 2030. Cependant, je pense qu'il ne faut pas employer le mot de super cible. Nous avons je pense qu'il faut choisir un autre langage. Il faut peut-être trouver un langage qui soit le langage du nouvel agenda urbain avec des mots spécifiques de façon à ce que l'on ne fasse pas de confusion entre le cadre des SDGs et des cibles qui sont la Bible finalement de notre travail maintenant, puisqu'il a été approuvé par les chefs d'État en septembre dernier. Et je termine pour répondre à la dernière question. La question, et cela a été dit aussi par M. Elangbassi, ces partenariats, ces initiatives, ces objectifs nécessitent un système de redevabilité. Il faut pouvoir mesurer les résultats. Et là aussi, c'est ce qui a été décidé par les chefs d'État et de gouvernement en septembre, c'est de mettre un système de mesure et de suivi de l'agenda et de l'atteinte des objectifs. Et de la même façon, je pense que nous avons pour Habitat 3 à réfléchir à un système de suivi des indicateurs liés à l'agenda urbain. Nous avons à réfléchir à un cadre qui nous permette de dire si nous avons avancé. Il ne s'agit pas de mesurer si nous faisons bien, il s'agit de voir si nous progressons dans l'atteinte des objectifs. Et donc, il faut qu'on ait un outil pour voir si l'on avance. Et c'est comme ça qu'on arrive à faire des progrès, et les OMD, les MDGs ont été un succès parce qu'il y avait derrière un système de suivi et de mesure. Donc, de la même façon, pour les objectifs de développement durable et pour les objectifs de nouvel agenda urbain, il faudra des outils et des mesures de suivi. Et cette mesure de suivi, c'est aussi une question pour le secteur privé et pour les acteurs. Il faut un système de redevabilité, d'accountability. Il faut que nous puissions aussi être redevables, pouvoir rapporter auprès de la société, auprès des parlements sur l'avancement des projets. Et je termine pour dire que tout ceci ne pourra se faire que si, et je reviens sur ce que m'a dit Madame Laharpe, il faudra des modèles nouveaux, il faudra beaucoup d'innovation, parce que je pense qu'il faut qu'on travaille de façon plus intégrée, il faudra qu'on soit très créatif en matière d'innovation, d'utilisation des nouvelles technologies, il faudra faire des partenariats innovants qui nous permettront d'avancer. En tout cas, donc, nous avons un magnifique challenge cette année de réalisation d'ici Quito de cet agenda urbain nouveau qui va être construit sur la vision que nous avons définie tout au long de l'année, y compris la COP 21. Et nous avons besoin de l'ensemble des contributions de tous les acteurs pour que nous ayons un très grand succès à Quito en octobre 2016. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Henri. Okay, so now I would like to give the floor to the audience for questions. Would like to ask to our panel before, because we have another session after this. So we have around 10 to 15 minutes. So the floor is yours. Who would like to comments, questions, everything? You're here to participate, huh? Yeah, please. Could you please come? Yeah, come here close to the, because the microphone is on. This one, but it doesn't have a big cable. Huh? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. It's not working, I guess. Thank you very much. My question goes to the delegate from the African Union, and you mentioned the Charter on Decentralization and Local Governance, and I believe it can be a very powerful tool, but as far as I know, and you can correct me, only like 4 member states have so far ratified the Charter. So maybe you can let us know the strategy of the African Union to get more countries on board. Thank you very much.
Yes, it's only 4 countries that have ratified the Charter as of now. But as you know, ratification is quite a lengthy process. And there are more countries, about another 10 countries are in the process of ratification. So we believe by the end of 2016, the Charter will now be operational. You know the process of ratification, you send the Charter back to the countries, they develop a cabinet memo, it goes to cabinet, then the cabinet sends it to Parliament, Parliament sends it to the relevant secretarial committee in charge of local governments in that country. They do a consultation with their local governments, then bring it back to Parliament for final adoption. And in some countries, given the bureaucracy, this can take a year or so. But we are monitoring. There is a team that has just completed a tour of several African countries just to keep up the momentum and ensure that we've got the minimum required number of 15 by end of 2016 so that it can now become universally operational in Africa.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, madam. Could you please come to the panel? Sorry.
Thank you very much. My name is Nomvula Mahlangu, a child of STI. I'm basically going to ask Salga. As they've said, they've got 276 municipalities around. Do they make exchange programs from local, regional, and national exchanges to learn from one another municipality that is doing best or got a clean sheet in auditing and everything? And if that is happening, have they identified maybe a learning center so that, as I'm saying, the exchange, that the other municipality can go and learn from that one how to do things, with whom and how? As with SDI, we've identified Cape Town as our learning center, national and international, for all visitors. The other one is the LME that we were talking about. I was just going to ask the structure in the LME, but I'm covered. Is that in their LME, are they setting targets to say we want to reach so far on their goals? And do they have their time frame to say maybe in 6 months we want to see this municipality have done that and their achievement? And are they reviewing maybe to give their self time frame to say after 6 months such a municipality will review what is their achievements and their challenges and what is the solutions and the risk? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed, SALGA does try and ensure a lot of peer learning and learning from other countries. And one of our visions is to have at least 3 centers of excellence across the country. The one you referred to in Cape Town. There's also eThekwini, the Municipal Institute of Learning, where many municipalities go in terms of water issues, waste, electricity, and so on. I think it's the peer learning and sharing from different cities is an area of work we're trying to increase opportunities for all municipalities. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Does it answer your question? Yes? Very good. Rose, please. If you want to ask a question, you can, but I mean formally. Okay. Yeah, 2 more questions, and I think we will close the session with a few words from our rapporteur. You and Mr. and Claire as the last speaker.
Merci, je vais parler en français. Je remercie tous ceux qui sont intervenus. Et je suis Ghislain Rounon, je viens du Bénin, du ministère de l'Urbanisme. Moi, j'ai une préoccupation quand on parle de négociations politiques, négociations avec les partenaires par rapport à la mise en œuvre du nouvel agenda urbain. La décentralisation n'est pas encore une réalité dans tous les États africains surtout. Dans beaucoup d'États, ça reste encore à l'étape deux mots. Le transfert des compétences et des ressources n'est pas réellement encore une réalité. Alors, comment est-ce que les communes qui ne sont pas capables de mobiliser à eux-mêmes un certain nombre de moyens pour faire face à la mise en œuvre de ce nouvel agenda vont faire, dans la mesure où le politique ne lâche pas complètement la mise à disposition de ressources? Je ne sais pas encore ce qui sera mis dans les négociations politiques, parce que le dernier intervenant a dit qu'il y aura des négociations politiques pour permettre quand même permettre aux différents chefs d'État d'avoir une certaine compréhension de la mise en œuvre de ce nouvel agenda. Donc, c'est un peu ma préoccupation. Merci.
Merci. En fait, c'est une question adressée à la fois aux représentants du gouvernement et aux représentants des municipalités. Donc, peut-être, monsieur le ministre, vous voulez dire un mot ?
Right. Thank you very much. To some extent, it is true that some countries in Africa are not doing it. But some countries, to some extent, are also doing it. In terms of Ghana, for example, I think the structures are there. We have all those layers. The only thing that probably I will agree with you is to do with the capacity when it comes to that level. But apart from that, the structures are there because some of the things are very delicate or they are above what the capacity of the local levels. So this is the only side that I will be able to comment on.
En fait, on ne doit pas parler après les ministres. Je voulais dire que hier, j'ai écouté la maire de Libreville et qui expliquait très bien la relation qu'elle avait bien sûr avec son gouvernement et comment elle avait mis en place un système finalement d'avancée progressive où avant même qu'il y ait des accords institutionnels, on peut quand même travailler ensemble sur beaucoup de sujets. Et donc je pense ce qui compte, c'est de trouver des plateformes de dialogue constructives avec l'idée d'atteindre des objectifs. C'est ça qui est nouveau dans l'agenda, c'est qu'on a des objectifs communs. Si on a des objectifs communs au sein d'un pays, entre l'État et les collectivités, on peut trouver des façons de travailler ensemble. Et c'est ça sur lequel il faut travailler. Et puis ensuite, les organisations, les institutions, les réglementations, les structures se mettent en place, ainsi que les outils de financement, les outils de partenariat se mettent en place. Donc je pense qu'il y a quand même beaucoup de façons d'avancer en ayant une approche très pragmatique des choses, du moment que c'est dans l'intérêt général et dans l'intérêt des objectifs. Je crois qu'il y a ce qui n'empêche pas qu'on peut avancer de façon institutionnelle aussi, mais je pense qu'on ne peut pas attendre que tous les problèmes institutionnels soient réglés. Il faut aussi avancer dans l'action.
Merci. La dernière question, Claire? Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Claire Short. I am a policy advisor with the Cities Alliance, but I'm speaking here in my own capacity. I just wanted to make a plea to the platform and the people here to take seriously Philippe's proposals for linking the Sustainable Development Goals and the outcome of Habitat 3. The analysis looked a bit academic and complex, but it seems to me this is a brilliant idea to get more energy into the implementation at city level of all these targets. And that if we could work on it, yes, we need to make it more popularized and not look like a spider and all that. I think it's a potential for real energy in the international system for development seriously with some targets and measurement, which all needs to be worked out for our agenda. So I think this is a very important piece of work. And by the way, I read it for the first time today. I don't have any links to it. But I think if we all take it seriously for Habitat 3, we might get something that could drive this agenda forward in a really useful way.
This is a brilliant conclusion, enthusiastic conclusion. So I think it doesn't need any response from our panel. I would like to thank our panel and ask Jochen if you can say a few words, wrap up the sessions, maybe draft some recommendations, and then I would hand it over to Dudu for the second part of this, what do you call it, workshop? Session, open session, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to acknowledge our panel who is dissolving right now, but I think we had a very broad selection of speakers, yeah? And allow me first of all to quickly introduce myself. I'm Jochen Mattern, I'm leading the DLOG Secretariat. DLOG is a network of development partners that is mainly funded by the German by the German Ministry, the BMZ, and the Swiss Development Corporation, and also the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs is playing a very active role here. And we are hosted by the German Development Corporation, GIZ. So I have that now nice part of trying to pull all these different strings together, which is nothing easy, but I think there is one key message that has been clearly came up, and that means that local governments have an important and essential role to play for implementing the SDGs and the future agenda, the future new urban agenda at Habitat 3. But we have also heard that this is a complex story, and this is why I'm very happy that we heard people from the AU level, from the national level, down to the local level, and this is the chain of actors that need to be involved and that need to play their role so that local governments can actually be empowered and can become development actors, important development actors. So we have heard from the African Union that decentralization and local governance is an issue, it's been taken seriously, and we have the African Charter that is still not endorsed by all countries, but it's on its way. And we have heard from the national government of Ghana that a multi-level system that clearly divides competencies, resources amongst the different levels of government is crucial for cities and local governments to play their role. And we have finally heard from SALGA, from the local government association, that also local governments can play a role through their association in influencing policies. And I thought a very, very important point has been made by Monsieur de Gassot, who has been also acknowledging the Addis Accra agenda, which really I think is one of the biggest achievements from this year, where local governments are also acknowledged in that global partnership of financing for development. And I think this is the second key message that has clearly evolved. Local governments need the capacities, but they also need the financial resources to be able to implement. And this can only be done through a global partnership of donors, of financial development partners, of financial institutions, of national governments and the private sector. And I think with that, I can leave it here. There will be a lot more things to say, but we have a second panel, and we will formalized recommendations nicely for everyone at the end. And I think we can now hand over to the second panel where we talk about these inclusive partnerships on a local level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jochen. So I hand it over to my colleague from UN Habitat to Dubai, who is going to...
Thank you, everyone. I want to change the tempo a little bit. I think it was a bit too technical and stiff. So I think the presentation to set the stage got a lot of people a little bit scared to react to it. So why don't we allow me to introduce my panelists for this second section. But if you look at the program that was prepared, this panel was supposed to concentrate on the know-how, the capacity, and the funding of local authorities to manage and be rendered accountable as we inch towards Habitat 3. So one of the three panelists I will call in is Madame Tamzin, who has a rich educational background with degrees from Witwatersrand, Stellenbosch University, and UNISA. She has 2 stints with the Directorate of Foreign Affairs, I believe, worked on West, East, and Central Africa, managing state visits and writing speeches, as well as, doing research for, I think, the Gulf Directorate. You also had, what would I call it, stints in India and Pakistan, did something on terrorism and what have you. And I also worked with SARS on research to leverage, institution building to increase tax revenues as such. And NDI, you also did something on women's participation. And finally, you landed it in Habitat for Humanity and taking care of their Africa operations. Welcome to the panel. The next panelist is Madame Rose Molokoane of the South African Federation for the Urban Poor. Madam, I think, is sitting in the management committee of SDI. Madam is also a veteran of the anti-apartheid struggle. She has been very instrumental in the region for setting up Federation of Saving Associations. Again, I think you are a well-known international grassroots activist in the area of land tenure and housing. You also were able to benefit from the Habitat Scroll of Honor in 2005, is it? For also making sure that the poor have access to land and housing. Thank you for joining the panel. Last but not the least is the Mayor of Tema, Mr. Isaac Ashai Odampton. You would love to know that this gentleman has a very diverse and rich background. A teacher, formerly worked as an official for the city of Tema. He was a consultant, a banker, a member of the board of governors of the Secondary Technical School of Manian. Then he played an active role in landing the NDC's an electoral victory, and they've been in power for the last so many years, isn't it? Lord Mayor. He also initiated trading arrangements for the city of Tema. They have these arrangements with City of Columbia in Maryland and many other cities in the USA. And is trying to work on an MOU with Durban for best practices. And is trying to brand Tema to be one of the premier cities on the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the rich panel we have. Now, just to set the stage, I just wanted to mention some key issues or things or initiatives that popped up during the year 2015. The outcome of the 3rd International Conference on Financing for Development, I think it was a milestone that was attained in 2015. It is also interesting to note that the SDGs were adopted this year, and these are global goals which belong to no institution, no UN agency or whatever. We are all meant to work on it and implement it together, and that brings on board the issue of partnerships. I also wanted to mention that with the SDGs being adopted, this time around we were able to come up with an urban SDG, a standalone urban goal. And its relevance towards the Habitat 3 process is paramount, it's important. I think we have to take note of that. And the fact that the sub-national levels of government will be highly relevant to rolling it out and making it meaningful as we go towards Quito. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the panel, I just want to remind us about the main issues that we're going to deal with today. The broad topic we have in front of us is local governance and the role of inclusive partnerships for the implementation of the new urban agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the new urban agenda, if you will allow me, is being shaped. And like Musée de Cazot said, everything will revolve around the SDGs. We are not going to set up a new urban agenda that will stand alone and operate out of the context or the confines of the SDGs. I think the Secretary General and the General Assembly, they were very categorical. This is the development agenda for 2030. Everything should revolve around it. So I think it's something to take into consideration, and we ought to bear that in mind as we debate or talk about the issue at hand. Now, if you will allow me, I think you saw the questions that were sort of provided by Citizens Alliance. But for the interest of digging deeper, I would want to remain within the confines of the title for this segment of this session, which says, you know, capacities for strong management, inclusive and accountable governance in the city. That is the know-how, capacity, which is always an issue. I don't know when local authorities, particularly on the continent, will have that capacity. But as the mayor of Dakar said, we should not wait for that to be given to us. We should build it. Even resources, funding, we should not wait for it. Some of us as municipalities are sitting on gold mines, which I think we don't have the capability or the administrative kind of infrastructure to maximize on the potential that we have. And I would like to see that come out in this kind of engagement. Again, don't forget, management and accountability is an issue. I'm free to start with any one of you. I don't know who wants to bell the cat. Okay, so you want to go, madam?
That's what they are preaching.
Well, you're not bottom for us. No, we won't. Okay, here you go.
Yeah.
You, the microphone?
Because it's one. I want to stand here.
Gentlemen, it could have been the river.
You know, when you come from the community and you are being allowed to stand on a pulpit, you should be proud because that's part of promotion. Thank you. Thank you very much. As I was said, I'm Rose Molokwane from Sheikh Dwellers International, and I'm happy to be part of the panelists to talk about inclusive participation. Sometimes I ask myself, what does it mean when we talk of inclusive participation? Because most of the time, when I listen to our local authorities, it seems to be they are confusing consultation with participation. Because mostly what they do, they will say we are consulting. And then when they come to the big conferences, they say we are promoting inclusive participation. So then I start to get confused to say two messages are being sent across different platforms. Today we are talking about partnership. In 2000, I was here in Joburg attending the World Summit on Sustainable Development, right here at the Santon Convention Center. And then it was discussed, I see here where Cities Alliance is saying cities without slums. And that time, it was some few years after the Habitat 2 conference that took place in Turkey. But here, that's where they were talking about the establishment of the MDGs, Millennium Declaration Goals. And the agenda was set to say we have to implement the MDGs. And then the first time when I was, on behalf of SDI, invited to New York to talk about the preparation to Habitat 3, I was listening carefully to the discussions, and then most of the member states were saying it was difficult to achieve the MDGs. Hence, we are changing it to become the SDGs. Then I ask myself a question: are we changing the heading or are we changing the mindset? Because what I'm listening also here in the Africity is the same agenda. Inclusiveness. Challenges when it comes to inclusiveness. When are we going to have the mindset change? SDI, in that conference of the WSSD, we said, yes, you are talking about the MDGs, the Millennium Declaration goals. Then we asked a question: who is the goalkeeper? Till today, the goalkeeper is not yet properly trained. But we said to the conference, we as the people from the communities, we are the goalkeepers. Because every policy that is drafted has to be implemented on the ground. And who has to receive that implementation? It's us, the community people. Today, I'm feeling very much worried when I was listening to Madam from Salga saying there's a lot of confusion within the municipalities because there's a lot of isolations of departments. You can imagine if the municipality that is supposed to implement the policy is confused. What about me at the ground as the community? I am now going to be more confused because I won't be able to know who should help me when I get to the municipal offices. We are talking about goal number 11 on the SDGs. I was celebrating with the people in New York when it was adopted by the member states. And they were saying for many, many years, member states didn't want to listen to anything that concerns urban development. But finally, there was a big celebration that the member states have agreed to include urban agenda within the SDGs. Then I'm asking myself, are we still continuing to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but not implementing? What are we going to send to our conference in Quito? With us as SDI, we are happy to say we have been acknowledged because of the noise of the poor. We have been making noise in all these conferences for our voices to be heard because we don't want to become the recipients of the policies. We want to become the partners, and we want to see the implementable, practical partnership, not just the partnership that is written in black and white, and when we go back home, it doesn't work on the ground. We have today, in this conference, at about 2 o'clock, we were launching our Know Your City campaign, and then we want the city officials to really accept what we are doing as the communities, because we have said for us to implement the Know Your City campaign, we have to come up with a program that will help our cities to also now know how to implement their own development to us as the community level. We are now specializing in data collection. The data collection, which is the information that we want to use to negotiate with our city officials and city politicians, to know the information about our communities and to identify the priority programs or projects that has to be implemented. Yes, we are staying in slums and informal settlements without toilets, without electricity, without water, but we are not giving up on life. We are saying we are doing it on ourselves, and we want our city authorities to really open up and accept, acknowledge innovation that is brought by the people themselves. If ever those doors and that space can be opened, that partnership, that recognition of organized communities by the cities, I'm definitely sure even the revenue that in South Africa they are having a serious problem of us, I have to be honest, of us from settlements for not paying the services. We are not paying the rent, we are not paying electricity. There are a lot of, we are call it izinyoka. People are just connecting illegal electricity. And it is damaging to the image of our country. It is damaging to the technical assistance that our cities has to give to us. But to avoid that, if we can create the real partnership, the real dialogue, the real mind shift of saying we want to do it for them, that's where our cities are failing, because they want to do it for the people. Whilst the people are saying, we can do it for ourselves, we only need your support. Let's join hands and meet each other halfway. We are ready. We are happy that the UN Habitat have recognized and listened to the voice of the poor to an extent that in the forum that they have created, which is called GAP, General Assembly of Partners, for the first time, they have realized that it is important to even include the grassroots constituency into this General Assembly of Partners. And we are so proud to say Sheikh Dwellers International is the co-chair of the grassroots constituency within the General Assembly of Partners under the UN Habitat. And then we are preparing ourselves. During the Quito conference, we are going to have a parallel Habitat 3 of community people, which is the community forum, where we will be having our own agenda that has to influence the member state agenda. We are doing work on the ground. We are trying to make the campaign of the urban agenda to be understood by our communities. We wish that the municipalities should also take the pains to themselves to teach the councillors. I was so worried when I meet with different councillors and others, they don't even know what Africity is. So there's lack of education to our people. We are there to join hands with you. We are ready to create the partnership work. And then if that can be acknowledged and accepted by everyone, it will be a very good way of changing the world to become the world for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rose. But I just want you to keep in mind, I'll come back to you to define what you mean by participation. And I will come to you again to look at how you will be able to work together with the authorities at that sub-national level to make it a better place for everyone, as a stakeholder. Tamzin, you want to come in? Or the mayor is ready to grab the mic? Please, 5 minutes, right? So that we can have more reaction from the floor.
Yeah, thank you. And it fits perfectly to be sandwiched between the two ladies on the panel. And I thank you for the opportunity. Indeed, following from where the SDI has asked the question, is there any confusion in the minds of the assemblies who are a critical implementation leg to all these discussions? And if we want to look at the issue of skill or know-how, capacity, and funding, we would have to situate this in the context of what is required to deliver the core mandate of every assembly as a body that stands on its own to deliver services to its people, and also what ought to be done within the global context as we follow through issues of sustainable development, climate change, and habitat issues. But yes, the know-how indeed exists. And where is this know-how going to come from? The national level involvement cannot be underestimated. And I believe that where we have the national, the regional levels of government, these bodies must necessarily support the local government to ensure that these skills or know-hows and capacities indeed are present. And in Ghana, we can say that the structures in themselves have set some key institutions that are driving this need for capacity building and technical know-how to support the agenda. And we can mention the Local Government Service Secretariat, a new body that is hemming all the necessary know-hows that we require, and also the Local Government Institute as a body that is continually supporting assemblies in terms of know-how and how we build capacity through the work we do. In all this, we cannot leave out the support of the international development partners. And these are also supportive bodies that are contributing to how we get these three key elements of our agenda going. I mean, the know-how, the capacity, and the funding. And we can see this in peer learning. As we are doing here, we are exchanging ideas. We can also see this in networks. We have seen networks across Africa and within countries that are sharing experiences and ensuring that capacities are built locally, besides the ones we have across the globe. For us in Ghana, the Urban Development Unit of the Ministry of Local Government and Development and Rural Development has a specific agenda to ensure that capacities are built. And so within the activities of urban development, we have capacity support, which is a critical component of the activities of our local government, the ministry exercising oversight responsibility over the assemblies. Again, we have the regional technical advisory teams, and these teams are very experienced practitioners who have left office and are giving the assemblies the backing. And I believe these are good platforms that we can deepen know-how and build capacities to support assemblies. Probably I also have to mention the good works of our brothers from GIZ who are continually supporting assemblies. And we are happy to share with you that they have even seconded a technical permanent staff to the Local Government Association. We call them NALAG, National Association of Local Government. And I think that these are all good platforms that we can leverage on and build capacities for the task ahead. But there's one thing that we have always feared. Do we have the capacity? Yes, to some extent we need to build. But there are also some capacities just around us. And I have the experience of leveraging communities within the Tema metropolis. For example, you go to a community that has high density of retired civil servants or retired workers. And you would think that these people have lived their lives already. But if you get closer to them, I believe assemblies can utilize these freelancing technical support in our jurisdiction. And as I speak, I also acknowledge the hollowness or the lack of capacity in some areas. When you go down the ladder and look at the lowest level of governance, we call them the unit committee levels. Yes, when they come in, they may not have the expertise, but we can have a system that gets closer to the locations where they are situated and then tap into what they can offer and what the retired people in those communities can offer. We can think about all these things, but the need for effective financial management, not only for the revenue mobilization, but how we do harness the revenues and apply them, being mindful of leakages and things that do not support effective governance. We must also look at how we innovate. We are all aware of the traditional sources of funding for local assemblies. The local taxes are there on property rates. we can talk about business permits, we can talk about licenses, but these are the traditional sources of funding. Are they giving us enough for us to budget for the core function of the assemblies and also deal with these global issues that confront us? The global issues are real because as we benchmark for global standards and pursue innovations, we ought to do this within some funding regimes. And now the question has been asked, should major cities be funded or they should rather generate more? I think it is time for us to perfect the revenue systems and not to continue to rely on the traditional sources of funding. Which other areas can we look at? We can begin to look at service-driven activities of our assemblies. If we want to build capacities, it's not only what we get from the national or the institutions, but local assemblies must also invest in specific gap areas. What is the gap that we have at our local level, at the assembly level? And once we have identified those gaps, whether the national or regional level government is able to support or not, the local assemblies must be able to invest in this. And this is why we need to perfect our revenue streams and ensure that we are generating more than what the traditional sources of funding have given us. We can think about how we could also now shift from entirely social projects to socio-economic projects. How are we funding our projects? And I can refer to our urban development units program to support municipalities and metropolis to go into more economically, financially viable projects that would be the catalyst for development in our area. I talk about projects that would be able to fund themselves, repay, and become additional revenue or revenue generating streams for the assemblies. And as we talk about all these, we must also look at what I refer to as the RSVP. Before we used to say responde s'il vous plaît, but today I want us to look at it as having a revenue stream that is reliable. How are we able to even anticipate our future revenue streams? As local assemblies, and I like what Madame said, that we ought to build solid data. If we don't have the data, then our revenue streams cannot be reliable, and they cannot be sustainable. Again, they must be verifiable. If you are talking about corruption and revenue leakages, it is because we are not able to verify our revenue streams. But if we can verify and ensure that we are getting the best from wherever they ought to come from, I think we would be on the verge to strengthening the funding component of how we make our assemblies more adapt to the present needs. And we should be able to predict our revenue streams. And in Ghana, there was a directive from the president, and it came with huge commitment from the local government service that all our streets and properties must be named and addressed. And it is not just in that statement, but how that activity would support the revenue generation and the database of each assembly is the roadmap for us towards 2030, when every assembly is expected to be self-reliant. And I think that policy directive from the president has generated the discussions around internally generated funds in Ghana. And I believe the future is bright for us because we are on the verge to making our revenue more reliable, predictable, sustainable, and verifiable. I believe in all this. If we continue to share knowledge platforms like this, we would be improving the know-how, building capacities, and improving revenue for future Africities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Adamson. I like the RSVP. I really like it. I'll keep that for myself. But I think if you could just keep in mind something that I think Muse de Cazot mentioned about municipalities and national governments, how they will work together to make sure they roll out the new urban agenda. Muse de Cazot, there are countries, and increasingly we have seen in the world, where municipalities are governed by the opposition parties, quite different from the national parties. And I don't know how and what will make sense to the national party, giving the municipalities all the leverage to do a good job. That is just eliminating themselves in the process, rather than facilitating them. So let's keep that in mind. Tamzin, we are all yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon. So I'm going to really talk about participatory, inclusive and accountable local government by specifically referring to two of our programs. I'm also going to refer a little bit to our focus on our recommendations for Habitat 3. So, where am I now? Sorry. Let me get up to the top. Okay. So Habitat for Humanity's vision is a world where everyone has a decent place to live. It's anchored in the conviction that safe and affordable housing provides a critical foundation for breaking the cycle of poverty. Habitat has helped more than 3 million people construct, rehabilitate, and preserve homes since 1976. So, with reference to Habitat 3, we've been involved in all the major processes. I'm not going to go through them in the interest of time. Our recommendations are an emphasis on housing, both informal and formal. We believe that focusing on housing reduces poverty, generates jobs and economic growth, and is critical in addressing energy consumption and climate change. So, as the Sustainable Development Goals confirm, the availability of adequate and affordable housing is essential in fostering safe, resilient, and sustainable cities. The prioritization of security of tenure and access to land is another priority. People shouldn't live in fear of eviction. And again, there's a foundational nature of secure land rights, which presents an opportunity for Habitat 3, which we believe should not be missed. Fostering community-led development is a third recommendation. Communities know their needs and should be able to define their future. Habitat 3 must incorporate the priorities of citizens and communities, especially women, the poor and vulnerable groups. Again, Habitat 3 should also bear in mind that there's a need to set specific and accountable measures to produce an outcome document with specific and measurable commitments that contribute to the achievement of the SDGs, and account for how cities will grow and evolve over the next 2 decades. Just very briefly, I just want to reflect on, again, the adoption of the SDGs, transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda. And we believe this calls for a paradigm shift in the way that we think about the challenges that confront us and the way we organize and seek to manage the transformation that is required. And of course, cooperation is going to be fundamental. Cooperative relationships, relationship building. Okay, right. So turning to our program in Cape Town, our South Africa office, the Habitat for Humanity office project has been geared towards investigating ways in which informal settlement upgrading processes and systems can be formulated to allow for extensive community involvement, and how community capacity can be built in such a way as to contribute to the government program, which is called Upgrading of Informal Settlements. Okay, so obviously the process is, generally speaking, the process of planning and designing of programs is generally a top-down blueprint design. And we believe that there's a need for a realization of the untapped wealth and local knowledge at grassroots level. And if we miss this opportunity, we miss building these into programs and making them more robust. So there's a revolution has ensued around social, economic, and political development and the recipients of development assistance. In other words, the question that the office asked themselves is planning for whom and by whom. That's a critical question we believe needs answering. Communities are an intrinsic part of decisions which impact their lives. Participatory planning designed to address a specific issue, opportunity, or problem. So the aim is to find solutions through the combined efforts of those involved in the process. By including a community in the planning and development process, they automatically have a stake. Oops, sorry. I just jumped. They have a stake in the process and outcome, and therefore not only take ownership, but also the eventual project outcomes. So there's a distinct case for using infrastructural investment to leverage. Sorry, I'm jumping around here a bit, sorry. Let me get back to my spot. Sorry about this. To leverage the development objectives by identifying the needs of the community. So, sorry about this. It's not going down. Okay. So, what has happened is government has had a very clear intent, both in its NDP 2030 to build an active citizenry, in the National Housing Code to support community participation, and in breaking new ground to have a responsive mechanism towards delivery. Upgrading the informal settlement program was designed to address social and economic exclusion by focusing on community empowerment and promotion of social and economic integration, building social capital through participatory processes and addressing the broader social needs of communities. Right. Sorry, I'm obviously at the wrong... Sorry about this. I'll have to go here, right. So the missing P, there's also been a focus on public-private participation, and we believe it should be the 4 Ps, so people, public-private partnership processes, to embrace a bottom-up participatory, strategic and public engagement, again for infrastructure planning and policy making. Okay, so what are the benefits of a bottom-up approach? So it enhances project feasibility by having a demand responsiveness built into the program, overcoming resource constraints, informed decision making, improved targeting in line with locally identified priorities, improved future cost recovery, building stakeholder cost consciousness, and enhanced sustainability, stakeholder ownership, and improved local capacity. There's enhanced transparency and accountability in the funds that are managed, improved resource allocation, and then again, conflict management and reduction of time delays. So here one thinks of protests. If people have a stake and buy into the process, they're less likely to be resistant towards it. So the outcomes of a participatory planning and design is the empowerment of communities, resilient communities, and supportive communities. So what was actually the challenge? What brought all of this about? And I think this is something one needs to reflect on, is the institutional capabilities to manage processes such as incremental tenure, infrastructure and shelter upgrading, and the development of appropriate regulations in a participatory and empowering way were yet to be developed. So the government was actually grappling with how to actually go about developing all of these regulations in a participatory and empowering way. So the challenge was a lack of understanding, a lack of public engagement, a lack of robust indicators, a challenge to measuring impact over the short time span, a lack of monitoring and evaluation, and a technocratic process. So the recommendations are, so we believe that the real value of people-public-private partnerships in all phases of the project should be engaged in planning and design, negotiations, implementation, monitoring and evaluation. Make use of locally based grassroots, intermediary organizations to help facilitate the process. Program and funding, grant flexibility in terms of responding to local conditions. And then institutional capacity building to undertake meaningful participatory processes. Government, private sector and civil society so involving all of those levels. Just very briefly, I'm going to quickly just end by referring to our Egyptian program, which aimed to alleviate poverty and raise living standards among poor and low-income households through improved housing. A simple, decent and affordable home fulfills the basic need of shelter and directly affects the well-being of families and communities, encouraging stability in all areas of life. The premise is shelter is a basic human need. The home is a personal asset that generally appreciates in value over time and for many, self-employment and micro-entrepreneurs, their home is a productive asset where goods are produced, inventory stored, and business conducted. So we worked, again, through collaborating with intermediary NGO partners and their partners, local community-based organizations and loan committees. Habitat for Humanity Egypt does not disperse loans directly, rather it provides its loan capital to NGO partners exclusively for housing microloans to poor and low-income households. Its NGO partners in turn assist, supervise local community-based organizations and loan committees in each community to disperse and capably manage these housing microloans. Habitat for Humanity Egypt provides training and technical assistance to partner NGOs, staff responsible for these loans, participatory community-based organizations and loan committee members in each community. So the benefits, and this is my final few points. Financial administration and staffing streamlining can be definitely seen through a partnership approach. Networking, expanded networks, government and skilled experts, improved financial literacy in the community, empowering local communities, developing skills of local artisans, improving community standards for decent housing, and strengthening of intermediary organizations, and a significant degree of financial sustainability. Thank you very much, and apologies, I think I ran over time.
Thank you, Tamzin. I think we don't have much time left. Whatever is left, I think I'll give to the floor. But remember, I still want you to bring back the panelists to the questions at hand. I think we've missed that a little bit in certain interventions. Let us see how local authorities can develop the know-how, which some of it came out. The capacity also, I think, came out. And whatever you are doing in your respective fields, how does that galvanize and build on the strength of local authorities to really accompany the process towards Habitat 3 and ensure that the new urban agenda is rolled out as we want it? Because the SDGs is the world we want, and we are all part and parcel of that framework that should get it done. So who wants to intervene from the floor? Again, you will come in front and pose your questions. If need be, introduce yourself. Anyone wants the mic? I have the mic. Somebody wants to take it away from me? Please, you're most welcome. I want you to talk about local authorities, please. A little bit.
Maybe, short introduction. My name is Benjamin Klaus. I work for the Association of Local Authorities of Tanzania, ALAT. To my sister from the SDI, thank you very much, first of all, for your wake-up call. It's always good if there are so many technical people and you hear a lot of things to get some strong messages as well. Thank you very much. And I also heard a bit of frustration from your side about the MDGs. And I think we all know the complex procedures that lead to such agreements. And it can be very frustrating. But let us not forget that the MDGs, one achievement was to reduce poverty, extreme poverty we are talking about, by more than half. And that is a very big achievement, I think. And let us not get frustrated in the process of coming to such agreements and goals. That is just one comment I want to make.
So in a sense, that was not a question, it was a contribution. Am I right? Mr. It's a contribution. Anyone wants to challenge the panel? And who? Please come forward. Is that mic working, Mr. Mayo? Yeah. Please introduce yourself and your organization and pose your question very quickly. We have about 10 to 15 minutes to go. That's it.
All right. My name is Rosalinda Hendricks. I'm from STI Namibia. Mine is just a recommendation on the use of the data, use of the information which has been collected. Sometimes it find it for us very difficult, especially when the local authorities and the local government are doing their data collections. Because this information never reaches within the community, it stays only in their offices. Because they do not include the communities, but rather get people who are coming to do the work. And this information only stays with them. So how can it be done so that the local authorities can include the local communities? Because if they engage and do the information, then they will know better what the needs of the people are. And the other is, if all this information is only with them, if they, like in our government, if they do census, they do it after each 5 years. But in the meantime, what will happen in the other years? Because they don't have the statistics and they don't know how to plan for the people if they don't have the figures and statistics of the cities.
Okay, are you talking of involvement then? Thank you very much. I thought SDI is very active in every country that I've been to. Yes, I have seen you are in different names, chapters, what have you. And I see you being involved in most of the grassroots work that's happening. So if you claim not to be part and parcel or not participating, maybe we should come up with examples. But let me not engage you in that direction. You just want to add to it quickly, or you're fine with the statement of your colleague? You're fine. Okay, you want to say something? Please. The other man, let me just hand it over.
I think that the local governance system itself has an inbuilt information sharing mechanism. You can always have access to your locally elected assembly member or unit committee member. Besides that, assemblies would always have town hall meetings, platforms at which local people are supposed to participate. But I do share in the concerns that if they are excluded, it makes implementation difficult. And so it is in both the local government and the people's interest to have inclusive participatory approach to development.
I think Rose will not be happy with you by saying inclusive participatory. She doesn't like those words. Rose, you want to say something?
I'm not against the terms. The only worrying factor is that the implementation of the terms. Yes, as you are saying, in every country where SDI is, there's a lot of activeness. It's more active from our side than from our city. We have to struggle to get into the offices of the mayor, the offices of the town clerk. And it's too minimal that partnership works. That is why we are always reminding the local authorities that we are there, we want to work with you. That's what we are pushing for.
Okay. Anyone else from the floor, please come along. You've realized that Tamzin introduced a fourth P. So you may want to comment on the fourth P, which I think is participatory. Please grab the microphone over there, introduce yourself and pose your question.
Oops. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Dana de la Fontaine. I come from GIZ in Mozambique, where we also have a cooperation with SDI. And I'll be interested to know how this urban requalification topic comes into SDG 11. Have you got any proposition on that? Any thoughts on that?
Can you please simplify the question for me? Because she said it and it was a bit technical. Can you simplify the question for me?
Sorry, can you come again? Madam?
Yes. So SDG 11 on the urban topic, on the urban development topic. In what way it touches the question of urban requalification? That's basically the topic you work on. Community development, to say. And do you have any kind of, let's say, does SDI study and have any kind of recommendations on the SDG 11?
Yes, I will try. The first thing that we want to see happening is that the recognition and the acknowledgement of community-led data collection. I think that is very important, because if the SDGs accept the information that is collected by the people themselves, it will be much easier when it comes to the planning of the city. And then secondly, the innovative projects that communities are doing at the community level, if it can get technical and financial support from the cities, it will work very well. And then again, we want to see, when we talk of participation and partnership, we want to see the establishment of forums whereby the city, the national government, and the community sit together, take decision together on how the city should be planned. If we can create those forums, meetings that takes place between the stakeholders and government, yes, it is happening, but it is happening in a very minimal way. And then that is why development is becoming so slow. We are not against what is happening. Very good things are happening. Like in Uganda, we have done it. We've got the forums that are happening. We have even created the City Fund together with the city of Kampala, the city of Jinja, and also the national government. They are contributing some money in the City Fund, and the Federation is also contributing some money there with other stakeholders within the communities. And it is working very, very well. I remember also in the Tema municipality, we are working together with the Tema municipality. That's why I'm saying we want this to be accelerated at a higher level, because it is there at the lower level, and it makes us to be a bit jealous to say it seems to be we are not scaling up. In many of the areas it is happening, but the scaling up of this should really happen, and we'll be the happiest. We'll jump over the moon if it can happen.
I'm glad you quoted some very good and working examples. And I want to add to that also Zimbabwe.
Oh,
I've seen your colleagues in Dialogue for Shelter.
Yeah, there they are sitting there. They should have spoken.
Yes, those are my friends. I've been with you in Dialogue, you know. We have a lot, I've seen a lot happening actually. Assignment that you are quoting in Accra, I think you're doing a good job with the local municipalities. That's Amuijo in the...
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think
and Namibia, the government of Namibia, they are giving us 7 million rent every year.
So then you have very positive best practices with local authorities.
Exactly.
It's not consultation, it's participation.
In Habitat 3, can you put us at the plenary, not at the site events? We should be part of the plenary so that we can showcase to the whole world the good thing that we are doing.
Noted.
Noted. Next Cities Alliance, please.
Inclusive participation.
Inclusive. Also in the plenary, not only at the site events.
Anyone from the floor? It seems everybody's happy. Should we wrap up and call the rapporteur? Or someone wants to come up? Is anyone hesitating? I see some people eager but hesitant. Anyone? Then I think, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this session, and I would, on behalf of Cities Alliance, want to thank the panelists so much for finding time to come here and talk to us and reacting to questions from the floor and appreciating the contributions that have been made. So Rose, Tamzin, Mayo, Isaac, thank you very much. Muchas gracias. I will now invite the rapporteur to sum up.
If Rose got promoted to the podium, Thank you. If you don't mind standing behind you. Yeah, I was asked really to wrap up this session, but also to wrap up the entire discussion that we had this afternoon. 3 points on each one. One is how to mobilize know-how, capacities, funding, strengthening management, and accountability in a city, what we discussed right now. I think one key message is building capacities, raising the level of professionalization of local government civil services, to upgrade and basically put them in a position that local governments are capable to address what Philip Misowitz introduced earlier, this very complex nature, systemic nature of the Sustainable Development Goals, making it attractive to work for local authorities. I think there was a good point mentioned in this panel that we also have to not only just to assess the conditions under which local authorities operate, but really to improve our understanding about the conditions in terms of staffing, finance, the kind of legal constraints that exist, but also to use the potential and tap upon the capacities that exist outside the municipal administrative structures of going to retired people, going to institutions that form the entire communities. There are a lot of potential that needs to be integrated in a capacity building. Also to make it more attractive to work for municipalities. I think there was one striking point mentioned throughout the panel, that discussion here and before, is when we heard statements from the Deputy Minister from Ghana to say, we would like, with a perspective over the next 15 years, delegate competence and resources to the municipal level. The question I think we need to address, what's the motivation behind? Because I think that's the kind of trap that exists. On the one hand, we advocate to use the New Urban Agenda as an implementing mechanism for the urban component of the SDGs against the background of an administration at local level that is weak, that is not really in a position to make it attractive, to mobilize private capital, to define its own goals, to push for a multi-level governance system that is required in order to comply with this very ambitious agenda. Second thing is we need country, or reflect the diversity of the different countries. We heard this morning, that there are, at one of the morning sessions here at Africities, the African position to the New Urban Agenda was presented, and I think it became very clear also in the discussion we had here that against the backdrop of international commitments, we have heard 2030 Development Agenda, COP21, no matter what is coming out there, but also the reference to financing for development, the others that is making a specific reference to necessary adequate staff financing of investment for development at local level. It is very specific and important to really look at the specificities of each of the countries, particularly when it comes to the power municipal governments have. That differs very much. And also what we heard in this panel and the previous panel, that it differs very much when it comes to the political will of governments really to delegate this kind of power. We shouldn't forget that 2030 agenda, it's nothing that is hidden in stone. It's an agenda and with a quite unique process. Countries got together. This is why 200 countries got together. They ended up with 169 targets clustered around 17 goals. So you can have two perspectives on that. I share the very ambitious one, but it's still national government driven and it's voluntary. We should keep that in mind, that there is no obligation by countries really to perform and put that into practice. It's a political commitment, and we will see how strong this political commitment is. And I think we should be very careful in now delegating all the obligations to the municipal level. The third one is about inclusive cities governance. So running a city is a complex challenge requiring multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, long-term approaches and the mobilization of major private capital investment. when this is coming to, or to translate inclusiveness, is quite a big challenge for a country. So it's not something where an inclusive programs that then are turned into policies and programs is something that can be handled by municipal authorities. It is part of a wider game of municipal actors, about provincial governments, about national governance, and then linked it also to the multilateral world. It's about urban policy planning, partnerships that are framed in this multilateral system, which is based then on equal partnership. Rose, you made the very strong comment, as you did already in New York when I met you for the first time, to say it's not about participation, but it's about substantial engagement. But the question is how the substantial engagement will look like. When you said that you will, and I'm sure you will do, SDI is going to make a big noise in Quito. Of course, you should be on the podium. But I think it's interesting really to bring this to the attention of policymakers and policy-making processes right away. We are all aware that the zero draft of the new urban agenda is due in April this year. So I think much of the noise that you will definitely make has to take place right now in order to convince national governments that we need consultation mechanisms that allow really to bring these voices to the table. Keeping into consideration all the presentations and some more generic conclusions that I want to draw and that we would like to use to convene also this message, it's about linking the new urban agenda with international relevant policies and goals. It is about 2030 goals. It is about the Paris outcome, something that we don't know how it would look like, but we have some sense of that, but don't expect too much from that. Financing for development, but there are plenty of other sectoral programs and policies in place. I think that's the biggest challenge for local municipalities and for each of these governments in terms of reporting, in terms of integrating policies to develop a program that is consistent and also then to raise and leverage the kind of investment that is necessary. Example is the question of cities and allow them access to climate finance. I know about the reference made in the others outcome document. The largest investment that we are going to have in the future that touches upon many of the questions included and aspects included in the SDG is around climate. And much of the investment is encouraged, particularly by the private sector, to feed into the Green Climate Fund with an annual investment of $100 million annual as of 2020. If cities have no access to that, if city networks have no access to that, I think this will be a lost opportunity and something we should keep in mind. Second one is on, I think it has been mentioned here, who's the goalkeeper. So it's on goalkeeping, monitoring, reporting, and review of the new urban agenda and national urban action programs or policies should involve all layers of government and all stakeholders within society. It's not something that can be exclusively done in terms of reporting. Review mechanism is going beyond that. It involves reflection on how successful countries were, but also to offer an opportunity to share experience. As I said, 2030 agenda and the SDGs and the urban component of the SDG is something that governments committed themselves as a political commitment, but it's still a voluntary process. And in order to be efficient, I think it's important really to build in a dynamic moment which a review can offer. It also would allow us really to, over time, because it's a 15 years agenda, it's very ambitious. I mean, eradicating poverty, eradicating hunger is something that we haven't managed over the past decades. That we stepwise every few years look at the gaps that exist and again come then to the point of who should and could fill these gaps, whether that's municipal level, what's the cities that can do that, or whether that is in conjunction with national governments. And third and last one, I think it comes back to the question of how to generate then the political will that is necessary to do so is national governments should establish financial systems which then leverage private capital, that delegate financial resources and expenditure to local governments. I think that's a very crucial question to do that. Local governments need to be supported by the national governments and development partners to reform their local tax system and local taxes that they raise. I'm personally a little bit skeptical about that, particularly when it comes in an era of competing interests. And climate is often seen by those working on the SDG component as a competing agenda. So no surprise when Philip demonstrated the picture of how the SDG 11 is related to others where there was an empty space like hunger, the implementation, and the climate discourse. I think this is something we should work on, but being aware that this is also a competition at global level. To summarize that, I was thinking, can we put that into one sentence? I would say I try it with one. I think key are national urban policies around domestic narratives. I think we had throughout the day, also in other sessions, always the question of looking at the diversity and the national context that exists. So national narratives that capture the very diversity and national context that exists, looking at the co-benefits, social, environment, and economic, and of course link it to ongoing multilateral processes. That's it. Philip mentioned already there is a brochure put out as a discussion paper by Cities Alliance. So many of these aspects that we have discussed here today are reflected in this paper, summarizing a couple of roundtables that have taken place in the past, posing a lot of questions. It's not, we're just at the beginning of that or in the midst of the process, so you can pick up when you leave the room a copy of that. I was not asked really to summarize this, but as a rapporteur to just pick up a few of the ideas. Thank you very much, and I wish you good luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, Serge has given me another responsibility. Well, on behalf of Cities Alliance again, would like to thank each and every one of you for finding the time to be here with us for these 3 hours of engagement. Pardon? And dialogue, sorry.